By completing this course, you will learn the following: the purpose and limitations of personal protective equipment, the HAZWOPER requirements for personal protective equipment, the varieties of respiratory protective equipment and their protection factor, the varieties of chemical protective clothing, how to select protective ensembles, the elements of site control, including the buddy system, the types and purpose of site work zones, safe practices for handling hazardous waste drums and containers, safe practices for entering confined spaces, and other safe practices, control measures, and standard operating procedures. If you enter a hazardous waste site, you need to be protected against potential hazards. The purpose of personal protective equipment, or PPE, is to shield or isolate you from substances and general safety hazards that you may encounter. An adequate PPE program is essential for the safety of any hazardous waste operation. Wherever possible, however, your site should employ other hazard control measures to prevent your exposure rather than relying on PPE. That's because PPE is your last line of defense against exposure. You're probably aware that PPE encompasses a wide variety of garments and other protective articles, including, but not limited to, respirators, hard hats, goggles, safety glasses, face shields and face masks, earplugs and muffs, gloves and protective sleeves, and safety boots and boot covers. PPE even includes chemical or fire protective suits or coveralls, safety harnesses and lifelines for fall protection, cooling garments, and life jackets. As we just said, your site should first rely on other hazard control measures before turning to PPE because of the limitations of personal protective equipment. First, there is no combination of PPE that can protect you against all potential hazards. Second, using PPE can actually pose additional hazards for you, such as heat stress, physical and psychological stress, and impaired vision, mobility, and communication. You'll find that specific hazards you encounter vary from site to site, so the PPE you or your site employer select may also vary. Careful selection is important. The HAZWOPER standard states that selection must be based on how the PPE will perform relative to the requirements and limitations of the site, the task-specific conditions and duration, and the hazards and potential hazards identified at the site. If necessary, your employer must provide you with atmosphere-supplying respirators and totally encapsulating chemical protective suits.